Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to today's video in which we are again taking a look at the Bitcoin chart, and hopefully we can find out if this was the bottom now or not, and what could be happening in the next days and weeks. I have loaded already the weekly chart with the logarithmic trend channel as we know it. Now I switch definitely to use the more pessimistic one, because the optimistic one was getting a bit unrealistic, I have to say. So we can see that we are kind of recovering from the low. If I activate the moving average of 290 days, that seems to be the super solid support now. It has been touched in March 2020. It would have been touched in August 2015, and we almost touched it now in this latest dump. So it is not unreasonable to assume that this has been the low. The volume kind of confirms it. The volume has been super high, which also speaks for the theory that this could indeed have been the low. But we are of course not out of the woods yet. We are absolutely not out of the woods. And if we go into the 4-hour chart, in the last video I was saying that I see kind of a similarity to what Bitcoin did in 2018. Let me just load the comparison chart. Here we see the current Bitcoin chart and the current low, and here on the lower side of the screen we see the Bitcoin low of late 2018, early 2019, and we do spot some similarities, right? We do spot some similarities. This here could interpret it by this peak here. This one could be interpreted by this peak here. This structure could be like this one. Then we would go down a bit, then wobble around, and at some point we would start going up. But of course, the problem with fractals is that they always look nice and sometimes they work until suddenly they don't, right? Suddenly they don't. For example, if I now switch to the 2-hour chart, I could also say and drag this out that this actually, right, this here has actually been this structure has been this one, and we see that if we say it like this, then the fracture has failed because it should have pumped here already, right? It should have pumped here, but it just doesn't. So we can of course switch to different time frames and continue with our fractal comparisons, but of course fractals are always a bit problematic. I should add this, that when we do fractal comparisons, fractals are always kind of nice and entertaining, and sometimes they work nicely because we know that history never really repeats, but it rhymes. But sometimes it just does new stuff that we wouldn't expect. So if this is really like this here, right? If this continues, then we can expect still a few more days of sideways, maybe even 1 or 2 more weeks of sideways until we pump. But of course, there's no guarantee that this fractal will play out, right? There's no guarantee. But I still think that the chances are pretty good that we at least see a bounce if we say that, okay, maybe we are going lower and it's not over yet, right? Because the lowest lows of this trend channel are still even lower. We are now at 13,700 as the possible low of this trend channel, and we see that it has actually been undershot in March 2020. So it's not unthinkable to say that we are actually dumping another time, right? It's not unthinkable, but I still think that this bounce is going to be a bit higher. So I think that this resistance line here will be retested. It will be retested in some form, and then we might go lower a second time actually, and then actually really test this lower logarithmic resistance line. So I think some form of bounce must happen because Bitcoin is so ridiculously oversold on all time frames that some kind of bounce just has to happen. If we go into the weekly, we see that we are still like on levels here in the weekly RSI that are still below the 2 lowest lows that we had historically. We are still below that. Just think about it. Even after the last green candle that has happened last week and the one that is happening now, we are still, despite this, lower than the historical lows of 2015 and 2018, which is absolutely insane to think about. Now, the reason why I think that we might see some kind of bounce, at least in Bitcoin and in stocks, is that the dollar index appears to be dumping, right? We said already a few times that there is quite a massive bearish divergence building up in the dollar. We have these higher peaks here in the price. We have these lower peaks here in the RSI. So it is not unreasonable to assume that at least it will see some kind of corrective move in the next weeks, which would of course be the perfect opportunity for Bitcoin to bounce. And this is also true in the weekly chart. If we look at the weekly dollar chart, we still see a massive bearish divergence here, a really strong one. If you look at the peaks, that's really a crazy strong one. Higher highs in the price, lower highs in the RSI. So normally that is quite a strong sign, right? That is normally quite a strong sign for a reversal that might be taking place. The most important currency for the dollar index is the EURUSD, and the EURUSD has been doing this low pattern here that we have analyzed a few times. It really looks like some lows that we have already seen. If we, for example, compare the EURUSD chart here above to the total crypto market cap without Bitcoin, we see the hilarious similarity how such a low structure looks. Here on the left, we would identify it with this one here, the right peak with this one, and we see that normally we should get a recovery, which means, of course, if the euro pumps, that the dollar index dumps, right? And if that is the case, then we should at least minimally, like as a worst case scenario, say that Bitcoin make some kind of bounce, that we at least then touch this logarithmic falling resistance line, so that we would do something akin to the last times where we had such descending logarithmic resistance lines here in 2018. Very famous one, of course, in 2013 to 2015. But even in 2011, we had a falling logarithmic resistance line, if we look at it. I mean, Bitcoin likes to do this stuff, right? Falling logarithmic resistance lines. And once we break through this line is when the new cycle really starts and we go to higher prices. And normally not before that. Normally not before that. Before that, we are really in a brutal downtrend all the time. And every time we broke through these logarithmic resistance lines was the time when we went on to new higher prices. So at least I expect a bounce to this logarithmic resistance line as a worst case scenario. And then we could hit another low and then go into the next cycle. But of course, we do know, friends, that this is quite dependent on the stock market, because Bitcoin has become so very, very hilariously dependent on the stock market performance. So for that, of course, to happen, we will need some strong bounce now in the stock market. If you say, okay, due to the very bad economic circumstances, we will not see new all-time highs, then at least some form of bounce before we go lower is not unlikely, because such bounces occurred always in all bear markets. If we look at it, for example, before the big drop in 2008, we always had such bounces. We always had some nice bounces before the real drop would start. Or here, of course, in the .com bubble, you can say, wow, there were some pretty nice bounces. Here, for example, would have been pretty nice to take this bounce with you before we then would go into the final low. So if you are a bear and you think the stock market will go a lot lower and we will see a huge correction, then at least some kind of pretty epic bounce has to happen sooner or later, because this thing has just been dropping without any big correction, which just cannot be sustained. There needs to be some kind of intermediate low and some kind of stronger bounce before we then head lower. And that would be a good time, if you think that this is the scenario that is going to happen. That would be a good time to de-risk your position. If you have a very high coin portfolio, this might be a good time to de-risk somewhat and sell a portion of your coin portfolio, so that you have more fiat and that you re-enter the market here when everything has dumped. Because let's be realistic, friends, I don't see Bitcoin changing its behavior anytime soon. Bitcoin is super correlated to the stock market. Bitcoin basically is just following what the stock market is doing. So that means if the stock market continues to rally because suddenly the Fed is pivoting and says peak inflation is behind us, now we will start making a pause with the interest rate hikes, then of course the whole market would rally, and consequently Bitcoin could even rally and make new all-time highs later this year or in 2023. But if of course the stock market makes a dead cat bounce and goes to new lows, it is pretty clear that Bitcoin will also dump a second time and might even go below this trend line as happened in March 2020, right? And goes again unexpectedly later this year to $14,000-$15,000 and then stays very low for a long time until in 2024 goes into the next cycle for the next Bitcoin halving. So that is a scenario we really have to think about. Of course, it will be interesting if this stock market pump will just be a dead cat bounce or will it be more sustainable. Now, taking a quick look at some on-chain metrics, we can see that there are some indicators saying that this could really have been the low, because for example the hash ribbons, they say that a minor capitulation has occurred, which has taken place only a few times in Bitcoin's history, and we see when this has taken place, this normally coincides to a major low. So minor capitulation means that the price of the coins are so low now, price of Bitcoin is so low that mining doesn't make sense anymore because the difficulty is very high, and then a lot of mining rigs are shut off, and this is the minor capitulation, which historically has always been a very good entry point. And we see that right now this is exactly what has happened. We had a brutal minor capitulation, so this could have been at least a local low, a strong local low. So therefore I still think that at least some form of strong bounce is going to happen. The Puel multiple says that this could have been a historical low. If we look at it from a historical perspective, only once every 4 years does the Puel multiple on average go to such low prices. It happened in late 2011, it happened in January 2015, it happened in December 2018, and it happened now, right? The Puel multiple has a very slow ascending trend, and we see that it is going into this green band on average every 4 years. So this is a strong sign that this could have indeed been the bottom. The 1 year hodl wave also tells us that this could have been the bottom, because every time the 1 year hodl wave reaches a local high, a local maximum, normally corresponds to quite nice buying opportunities before a major run-up. Was the case here in 2013, was the case here in 2015, was the case here in 2020, right? And this could also be an indicator that if you say that this is not the absolute low, then at least an epic bounce would need to come. Same picture with the net unrealized profit loss. We see an ascending trend here in the net unrealized profit loss, right? We had this insane low in 2011, and then in 2015 it was already higher, the capitulation low, and here again higher, and here again higher. So the trend seems to be that we are getting these higher lows in the net unrealized profit loss. So this also speaks for that this has been actually the historical low. So does the MVRVZ score, which compares the market cap to the realized market cap divided by the standard deviation. And we see that here also we have some kind of ascending trend where the low in the MVRVZ score seems to be in this green band here with a slightly ascending trend, which would fit the theory that this indeed has been the historical low right now of this cycle, because we see that this indicator also dumps only every 4 years to extremely low values, and this could indeed have been the historical low. So no matter if you believe now that this has been the historical low and that from here onwards we will never revisit these low prices and will just continue going up, or if you think that we will indeed go lower again, no matter if you think that or not, I think that a strong bounce is imminent. So either we bounce and then go lower, or we kind of go up and just keep going up until we reach the upper end of this long-term logarithmic trend channel again. This is really what I think is going to happen based also on the behavior of stocks. And as soon as I see signs of weakness, that the bounce is getting weaker and starts slowing down, that of course would be a time to de-risk your coin exposure, maybe sell a portion of your coins and then re-enter the market when it's going lower. So that is something which I want to find out with these daily update videos. Every day I will look at the indicators and we will try to find out together if this is just a dead cat bounce, if we are going lower, or if we are indeed going to pump and see new all-time highs directly from here onwards. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful, friends. If you did so, please like and subscribe to this channel. I would be happy to welcome you here. I will make daily updates on the crypto market and always compare with stocks and other stuff that is happening in the world. I wish you a nice day and see you in the next update video tomorrow, friends. Bye!